Now, whether you're playing a professional tour event or just down at your local muni course, shooting a 58 is an unreal score anywhere, which is exactly what Bryson Dechambeau did just a few weeks ago.
It was raining birdies for Bryson Dechambeau.
After changing to a driver not too long before the event to a less well-known brand name called Krank, they do the majority of their models for World Long Drive Championships, where they actually have the highest total amount of wins. So of course, after hearing this news, I had to get myself one to see if a long drive driver can help and improve a pretty average swing speed. A long drive driver head has a few noticeable differences, with the main one being the loft. So for a standard driver, you're looking about 10.5 degree, with at the lower end being 9 degrees and in some cases 8. Well, this long driver comes in either 6, 5 or even 4 degrees, with the option to adjust slightly on the loft sleeve. But before I was able to hit a few balls with the Krank driver, I did have to find a shaft for it, and something that I like about Krank is that you can order just the head on its own, so that you can put your own shaft into it. But getting back to the topic of Bryson, I decided to start off by making it to the same spec that he plays, using an XL grip and extending the shaft to 46 inches. I used this speeder shaft in stiff, as Krank use speeder shafts as their stock options, and the red of this shaft goes with the head quite nicely. And so once that was sorted, I took it down to the drive range to get some first impressions with it. Now, straight away, I knew that this was going to be a bit more difficult to use than what I first anticipated. Obviously, it was coming out a lot lower than what I was used to, but I wouldn't actually say it was coming out too low on the 6 degree setting, but I was absolutely hating the grip that I had on it, and the length of the shaft just felt a bit too long. So I took it back inside to swap the grips over and just put it back to a standard length again. Now that I had a normal playing club, this time I had to take it indoors as the weather unsurprisingly was terrible, but comparing it visually to my Stealth, there is a few noticeable differences. The head of the Krank, as you can see, is quite a bit smaller, and the shape of the face is a bit different as well to the Stealth, and I feel like this was the reason that I was struggling to not hit the toe with the Krank. But aside from that, and of course the flight, the other main difference was the sound. And I think the best way to describe the sound that it makes is to say that it has more of a crank type of sound to it. But after getting used to it now in some better weather, I decided to take it out onto the course. And I need to point out that I did experiment with another shaft option as well over multiple range sessions and a number of different rounds, including some competitions that I used it to play in as well. What I was finding was that the loft wasn't actually an issue. Getting it in the air was fine, but I was finding it so inconsistent, and the majority of my drives were leaking out to the right, which with my Stealth isn't normally the case, and they are normally pretty straight. But even the shots that were going offline were going further offline with the Krank than they would do with my Stealth, which, you could accept that if you knew that it was going to give you more distance when you did hit one down the middle, but I wasn't really seeing that either, and I felt like my Stealth would probably go further for the most part. Something that I just realised, which doesn't have much relevance, but I thought it's quite funny, because I have an arm lock putter, it means I've got 8 degrees of loft on it, and my driver having 6 degrees of loft means that I have more loft on my putter than I do on my driver. But anyway, let's take a look over the numbers now and see how my Stealth driver compares to this Krank driver. I mean, you can see straight away on the fly to them that the difference the 3 degrees makes. But ultimately, I just don't think my swing speed is quick enough for a driver with this low of a degree to maximise its benefits. My Stealth was carrying 12 yards further and rolling out 4 yards further on the total. So you can see that the Krank is getting more rollout, but the spin rate was actually very similar. The launch was the difference, with the few degrees being the key, with 21 yards peak height on the Krank compared to 34 yards peak height with the Stealth. I also actually tried hitting a few without the weights at the back, made it even lighter and just got the weight a bit more towards the front, making it lower spinning. But I was finding that to make zero difference to the performance, and really it just made it sound a bit weird. So obviously different clubhead speeds are going to show different results, especially when you take into account that Krank's faces use a trampoline effect, meaning that there is either more or less resistance depending on how fast the ball speed is, which is why they do make a range of different heads to suit your clubhead speed. So like this long drive driver is probably suited more to someone who swings probably 50% quicker than I do, and that is who's going to get the best benefit from this type of driver. Now, probably the main question on most people's mind is whether or not these drivers are legal to play in competitions. Well, the answer is yes, for the most part. So yeah, this 6 degree long drive driver that I've been using, which is the exact same spec as what Bryson was using, is fully legal legal to play in any competition. They do, however, have a couple of models on the website which aren't USGA confirming and are just made more for recreational use. So basically, whenever a company makes a new piece of equipment, whether that's clubs, balls, or even gloves, they have to send them to the USGA to be tested, just so that they can check that the product is meeting all of the legal criteria. They do have a massive PDF file with every club that is currently legal to play in any type of competition. But now, to get a better idea on how these are actually supposed to be hit, I again swapped the shaft over, and this time put in an extra stiff shaft, which obviously is what a long drive driver will usually come in anyway. And so I took it down to Highly Golf Club and give it to one of the PGA pros there, who does swing a bit quicker than me, and so we can see how he hits that compared to his current Cobra Aero jet. That's how it's supposed to sound when you hit it.
Ball speed, like.
So first ball in, and that was just a measly 190 ball speed using a range ball, which is up there with some of the quickest ball speeds on tour. What's like your normal ball speed with your Cobra?
I can get it like 185 to 190, like cruising.
Yeah. It's pretty good, wasn't it?
That launch was perfect, I just needed a better ball.
So basically, he wasn't happy with his 300-yard carry that he was hitting with the range ball. Even though shot tracers do compensate for using a range ball, I still think that this is quite far out. I did hit a couple myself just to show you the numbers that I was getting here compared to the ones that I was getting on the GC2 just a bit earlier. So there is about a 30-40 yard difference.
I feel like this, if you really mint it, it'd be class.
It'd be Bryson Dechambeau. Can we go back to your Cobra, see what that goes like again? Now you warmed up. Well, is this the first time you've hit a ball in like 3 weeks or something, did you say? It's high that, wasn't it?
I was straight to fair, 190 ball speed.
Pretty similar, in fairness.
Yeah, it is pretty similar, isn't it?
So after spending about an hour just smashing balls and seeing how far he could hit it, these were the furthest ones with each driver. So I mean, we could tell at the time that there wasn't that much difference between them, but the Krank did just edge it on the longest drive. And I did set that down to 5 degree with the Cobra Aerojet at 7.5 degrees. So the extra bit of distance it was seeing could probably just be down to that slight difference in loft. But the biggest noticeable difference was with the peak height and the launch. You can see just by their numbers that there is a big difference in the flight. But Sam did say that he enjoyed hitting it. Felt like he probably could get slightly more out of it. The main thing was similar to what I said, and it just didn't seem as forgiving. Now, I was going to end the video there, but I just want to include one more thing. Basically, about a week ago or so, I ended up selling this driver on eBay, and a few days later, I've got a request asking to have it returned to. And looking at this driver on closer inspection, I can see why he did want to return it. So basically, at the front under the head on the sole, it does look like there's a big hairline crack running all across it. So of course the first thing that I did when I did get it back was to ring Krank directly. I'm pretty sure actually it was the CEO who answered the phone to me on the customer service support. He basically assured me that it was just paint distortion and that it was nothing to be worried about. Obviously it does seem to still work properly, as we've just seen Sam carrying it 300 yards with a range ball.
Oh, money.
And it doesn't make the type of sound that you'd think it would make if it did have a crack in it. But it is apparently just something that can happen because they are all handmade. But I think because of that reason as well, there is a few other things on this driver which are a bit iffy. Now, I mean, there's a lot of drivers that do have their own issues, like ping drivers, the heads are basically impossible to pull off. And of course, stealth drivers have got a thing at the minute with the faces popping off. But with this Krank driver, just all the screws didn't really seem to fit properly. Like, it was an absolute nightmare trying to change the loft, and there's actually some loft settings on the adapter which I couldn't fit in, like it just literally wouldn't screw into place. And even one of the weights on the back doesn't seem to screw in properly, like it seems a bit loose when you screw it. And where the screw is in the head, it's actually really far down, and there is only a few different adapters that can fit into the bottom of it. But just the fact it is so far down, it isn't a massive problem, but it's just something that isn't as easy as maybe what it should be. But I am maybe just nitpicking slightly there. I say the customer support when I did get through to them was really good, and overall I do really like the driver. It's just a shame that I don't swing quick enough to benefit from it. But anyway, that's been all for today. So as usual, thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.